Testing, just making sure we have volume. G, can you hear me? Can you type in chat if you can? Awesome, thank you. Hey everybody, we're just waiting for our guest speaker, Jeremy, before we start. So it's going to be a few more minutes. Just waiting for him to join. Well, while we're waiting for Spencer to join us with Remedy Link, if anybody has any questions, I can start answering some. So then once Spencer joins, we can talk a little bit more about detox. So haven't really done a lot of these webinars last year, so I can maybe do a little bit of an introduction in case nobody's watched our YouTube videos. My name is Vlad. I am actually the owner, one of the owners at QA Supplements. We are a small company. We have a couple of people working for us, and we have a couple of owners. So we have about 3 owners, which is me, my mom, and my brother are the owners. Looks like Spencer is joining in 3 minutes. So we're a small company. We have started this company in 2015, so about 7 years ago. So we've done this for quite a while, and we were kind of looking for really cool and innovative ways to get people better, right? We were looking at supplements, we were looking at European supplements, and we were looking what's popular out and about and what really works. So we ended up reaching out to a number of people, and got a lot of great feedback on peptides, and we kind of just found those peptides and started importing them, and so doing that since 2015. So we're actually the first company to import peptides. And then probably halfway through, we found a company that manufactures some incredible detox products, and we kind of took some of those products in and started selling them, and started, using them, obviously, and realizing how amazing those products actually are. And it's been pretty cool. So it's been a pretty positive, really positive review from the peptides, and we've had, an awesome experience of combining the detox with the peptides. Our most popular detox product that we have is going to be for the digestive system. So, which is Zoybin, which helps with detox of parasites. It helps with detox of the digestive system, and it helps with detox of Oh, there's Spencer. Hey, Spencer. Can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, hold on. Hey, Spencer, your audio's not
okay working. There we go. All right, that was perfect actually before. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's been a while since we did a video call.
Yeah, I am so sorry about that. I thought it was tomorrow, so apologize. Okay, detox.
Yes. Perfect. That was just keeping people entertained.
Okay, so are we going to start from scratch with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and the whole 9 yards?
Yeah. If you want to start with kind of, I mean, let's talk a little bit about Candida parasites and kind of, you know, the most, I guess, at least the one that most important for us, just because it's the most best-selling product we have. And you know, what is Candida, what is parasites, different ways to take it. So, and
sure. So there are different classes of things that infect us, right? And modern medicine is really good at the acutely infective things. And this dates back to a physician and a scientist named Koch, who gave us germ theory. You know, I mean, early on, it was just we thought it was witchcraft and bad spirits and ancestors that were pissed off at you. And eventually they figured out, oh, there's things you can't see that are affecting you. And then we get microscopes and we're able to actually see things floating around in the water of a town where people are getting sick. Or you can culture something out of someone's blood or from the back of someone's throat. And the technology for culturing and for finding these things works really well for the acute crises like typhoid, you know, dysentery, things that get people violently ill, and usually you either survive it or you don't, and it's all over in a week. And that's because when you take a culture of something and you follow Koch's postulates, you have this sample from someone that's sick, and you get a sample from their, let's say they have some, you know, well, everything's going through them, and you get a sample of what's coming out of them, and you see something wiggling, and you get a sample of that, and you put it in a test tube, and then you give it to someone that's healthy. And if they get the same illness, you know, that's reasonable to say, okay, what was getting them sick was that wiggly thing that we just isolated. And the things that get people acutely sick are really transfer very easily like that. You get it in a test tube, it moves on to somebody else because they're meant to be in something at a liquid medium. They're meant to live in our bloodstream. That's why they get us so incredibly sick so fast. They get in our blood. They get in our liquids, the liquid part of our body. Now, that only accounts for a small fraction of the way people get sick. And it's the acute crises. The chronic stuff like Candida and all the things that don't get someone violently ill, but kind of drag them down for their whole life. You can't test it that way, because what happens is, let's say you get someone that's chronically ill and you get a sample of, you know, their body fluids and you put it in a test tube. And let's say what's getting them sick is a really nasty mold or Candida, or let's say it's some kind of, let's say it's a bacteria, but it's not the aggressive kind. It's not the kind that lives in fluids. It's the kind that lives on surfaces. All right, there's two different classes. Typically, the ones that get people violently ill live in the fluids of our body, and the ones that get us chronically ill tend to live on the surfaces of our skin, our surfaces of our organs. So if you get a sample of something that lives on a surface that's getting someone chronically sick, right? And you put it in a test tube, where's it going to go? It's going to go on the surface of the inner surface of the test tube. It's going to cling to the wall of the test tube. And then when you pour it and give it to somebody else, you actually didn't give that infection to somebody else because it was stuck on the wall. And even if you did, those kind of infections tend to be opportunistic. So if you give it to someone that's healthy, they may not get it anyway. So there is this entire class of chronic disease causing microorganisms that until recently have been invisible to science because they didn't transfer from one person to the other. If you did see them, you say, oh, they're just something innocuous. It's not causing any problems. And those are the biofilm forming infections. And so, if you go back in time when women were having PMS, and, some women have very, very difficult PMS, they were told that they were hysterical. Hyster means womb. That's where the word comes from. So womb oriented, but hysterical became, most people don't think of the word hysterical as relating to the womb. They think of it as someone who's kind of a little crazy or a little mentally off and imagining they're upset. They're not really physically sick, they're imagining it. And so we do this, they did a huge disservice to the women who had PMS by calling them hysterical, by saying it's in your head, right? It wasn't in their head. It's just science didn't understand what was going on hormonally because we didn't have that kind of sophistication. The same thing has been, happens to people that have chronic fatigue or Lyme, right? If you're not seeing the right causative agent, then a lot of times, a doctor will, rather than say, I don't know what's going on for you, they might recommend like an anti-psych med. And this happens with the people that have Morgellons disease, which I think your family had a close brush with, which is that nasty skin parasite. And, these people have horrific things kind of, it's right out of some, medieval, literature. Stuff comes out of their skin, and the doctors all think they're crazy, and they give them psych meds because they can't see, they don't understand the causative agent. So a lot of the things where people will say, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're being hysterical, oh, you're over exaggerating it, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a class of things that they don't see. And now a more honest answer would be, I don't know why you're sick, and I wish I did, and I don't, and if the doctor could say you really need to go look elsewhere because they don't have the skill set, that would be honest. The problem is when a lot of doctors will say either there is no problem, you're crazy, or there is no hope, right? Now, that's another terrible thing, because what is placebo but hope? And, the placebo method is something where they say, it's downplayed, but placebos work for like 1 out of 3 diseases and improve them, double-digit percents. If we had a medicine that worked on 1/3 of all diseases and improved them up to half, that would be considered the greatest drug of the 21st century. And what that medicine is hope, right? So when a doctor says, well, either A, you're crazy, or B, there's nothing that can be done, what they're doing is they're taking away hope. And that's a nocebo. That's the opposite of placebo. That's actually very detrimental to the immune system. That's detrimental to the person. So, for those of you who are listening, if someone has ever told you, A, whatever you're not doing well with, you're imagining, or B, there's no cure for it, you need to look elsewhere, because whoever told you that's not God, they don't know. What they should honestly say is they don't understand how to help you, and good luck, and they'll introduce you to some colleagues. And what people typically hear that with is with these conditions that are the chronic biofilm infections. Would you want to tell your audience, Vlad, what your experience was when you had that skin thing that transferred through your family?
Actually, I was going to try and speak up. It's actually a pretty interesting story. We ended up going on a family vacation out to Hawaii. This was about 2017. So almost 5 years ago, maybe 4 to 5 years ago, I don't remember off the top of my head. It was in April. And, we went down to San Diego, picked up my wife's mom from there. And then we flew out all together to, I think it was one of the smaller islands. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was.
Was it Maui?
No, it was smaller than Maui. It was, I think,
Lanai.
Huh?
Lanai,
yeah. So I think it was Lanai, which was a really, really small island. We got a really cool little condo with there was no glass. It was all just a blow-through type of beach condo, which was really cool. And we stayed there for a week or so. And as we came back, we noticed that we were all itching a little bit. we're like, oh, maybe, we had, something in the sheets, there's some kind of skin, contact to something that we didn't like, maybe an allergy. And so we started kind of going through the paces of like, okay, let's, is it milk? Is it yogurt? Is it a fruit that we're eating? So we tried changing diets. And now it gets to the point where you're like itching. And I didn't have it as bad. My wife had it real bad. And then my kid, who was 2 to 3 years old, I don't remember off the top of my head, it was really bad. And my mother-in-law didn't have anything. She was staying with us and she didn't have anything. And, we started kind of discovering that like we had to literally take a shower twice a day. We had to wash we washed all of our clothes after wearing it for a couple of hours. So it was so bad. And it was like, and then we started noticing that you have a place where it itches and you kind of start itching and you get like these little white balls. And then I actually had some, I don't know, it was a parasite or I don't want to get into the details, but I found some living things that kind of came out that was really kind of disgusting. And we started saying, okay, well, this is obviously a dermatologist issue because it's a skin issue. We've tried cream. So my wife ended up going to a dermatologist, to a regular doctor, see if we can figure out what it was. And we were essentially told, she was told that she's crazy. She has nothing. Her skin is perfect. There is nothing on there. And before that, we thought we had infestation of, obviously, bed bugs was the first thing we checked. Then we had the little, I forgot what they're called, the carpet beetles. We don't get carpet beetles. So we had our whole place pestified. We had all kinds of pests or sprays. We had, we thought maybe mice or rats got something into us, but it was nothing. So then I ended up actually calling Spencer, and I was like, what do you think would be the best scenario for this? Actually, no, I did not call you. I just grabbed the bottle of Zoybin is what I did. I grabbed the bottle of Zoybin because I knew that was for parasites. And if there was a parasite, it would get rid of it. And then we grabbed a couple bags of the purple one. Geez.
The Alopecia. Yeah.
Yeah, we grabbed a couple bags of Alopecia and we were taking a teaspoon of Zoybin every day, and then we had the kid do a half a teaspoon. We did Zoybin every day for a week. And then we did Alopecia for about probably a month. We did a solid month on Alopecia. And that was at the end of the whole ordeal. That was the only thing that actually made it go away. And it took us over 30 days to get to the point of experimenting different things that we were actually like going insane. We were, you're itching all the time. You're trying, to go to work and you're trying to see other people, but everybody kind of, is, you don't want to go see anybody because you're afraid they're going to think you're ill or, having some kind of, parasite or skin contagion. And yeah, the only thing that ended up healing it was essentially a combination of Zoybin and Alopecia. And then later on, we found out that there's actually thousands and thousands of people that have the same issue of, they're itching. They have this white balls coming out of their skin, and there's no diagnosis for it. And there's obviously no treatment.
Oh, that wasn't considered Morgellons? That was considered something different?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been
because Morgellons typically is the multicolored fibers coming out.
Yeah, we had white balls. Huh. Like they were white balls. Looks like salt. Like
wow.
It looked like chunks of salt coming from your hair follicles.
And was do you know if either one of them alone was the one that did it, or was really the combination?
I think it was the Alopecia that really did it. Because later on, telling my story to our friends, which was a little embarrassing to tell people that, we've had this, parasitic skin thing. but our daycare provider actually had the same issue, and we actually I gave her two bottles of bags. They used to be bags back then. 2 bags of Allergica, and she ended up actually having the same exact response. So
And how much were you giving people to get that effect?
she was taking just three a day.
3 capsules a day? Okay.
Yeah, just 3 capsules a day for a month.
So that's not the only thing that people get at Hawaii. There's the reason I asked if you went to Maui is there's a valley in Hawaii called Io Valley where there's a black mold that people get. And then there's a whole story about how there's a big massacre there, and so it's some kind of, the locals think it's haunted and it's ghosts, but there's terrific black mold that if people get it, it starts coming out of their skin instead of white balls, it's black tar. So yeah, there's definitely, there's some things in the tropics that you got to be careful of.
Yeah, it was actually Kauai. Kauai was the island we were at.
Interesting. It's a beautiful island.
Oh, it's beautiful, but I'm not have me and my wife probably have PTSD to try to go back there. So, but it was pretty scary. So.
Well, all right. So like what happened for you manifested on the outside, right? But for a lot of people, whatever is happening for them, whatever chronic parasitic, when I say parasite, it does classically parasites, when you think of them are like worms or flukes, but you could say that anything that lives on your body is a parasite. A parasitic relationship is one where something kind of hangs out, doesn't necessarily kill you, but kind of feeds off of you. It's like milking you, right?
Yeah.
So, you could have a bacterial infection that'll be parasitic in nature, but, these parasitic type infections, meaning they don't kill you, but they make your life miserable. There's a lot of them. And if, sometimes they will manifest on the skin and you can see them, in your case, little white fuzzy balls or pieces of salt. Sometimes, they don't make it past the skin barrier, and where they manifest is not something that's visible. And, maybe it's, in someone, in this between the brain and the skull, or maybe it's along the intestinal organs, or maybe it's up inside the prostate. So we do tend to get colonized with all sorts of things. A lot of people know that if you take antibiotics, you can wreck the gut flora and you have the wrong bugs growing in your gut. But I suspect that there are good bacteria that actually live everywhere in your body. And when you throw off that flora, it's not just a matter of getting a bad gut flora. You could get a bad brain flora. You could get a bad arterial flora. I think we're a lot less sterile than we believe we are. And we really live in a communal way with lots of microorganisms and a very delicate balance that we throw off. It's not just the pesticides. It's not just the antibiotics we take as drugs, but antibiotics in the meat and, pesticide residue. And, unless you have mountain spring water, the water that you're drinking was reclaimed from a sewage plant. So, you could catch some like thousands and thousands of human metabolized drugs in the water supply. I mean, if we grab the water from, the average tap in an average city, you'd find the easiest way to tell is you'll see Benadryl in it. But you'll see all sorts of, the most common drugs will show up in there. So, we're constantly kind of playing around with our flora. And so understanding how to deal with these kind of chronic things, it's an important aspect of getting healthy, especially if you've got something that you've had for years and don't know how to get rid of it. And, if someone says, oh, you're crazy, no, what they're really saying is that they would rather call you crazy than be humble and admit that they've stepped past the limits of their knowledge base.
Yeah, no, it's kind of, and I mean, to be completely honest, I can't even tell you how many people that I've talked to, just, people that buy from us, our customers, that have been called crazy. It's, it's, I think, and that's kind of, there's a really big line of, being called crazy when you actually have something, because somebody's unable to figure out what it is, and having that combined with, being frustrated. And I think that's,
Well, I mean, having a chronic disease will make you crazy. I mean, it can definitely. So, when I talk to somebody over the phone or I meet them, I've been able to recognize certain signatures. So if someone has a fungal infection, you can hear it in their voice and the way they move and the kind of words they're choosing. And if someone has a classical parasite worm kind of infection, it creates a different kind of personality. These infections alter our personalities in ways that when you've been around long enough, you recognize it. So when the doctor says you're crazy, well, how about say, I recognize that your personality has shifted, and let's see if we can figure out what's doing that so we can bring you back to who you used to be.
that's a great point. Yeah.
So do you want to open this up and see if there's any questions that your audience has so we could start moving in different directions?
Yeah. Let's see where if anybody's got any topics that we want to hit on, or we could just keep, plugging away at some common things. So.
All right. Well, until we get until a question pops up, you wanted to talk about Candida. So Candida is one of actually has a relationship with heavy metals. Candida will actually bind to metals. So, on the one hand, yes, the Candida is making a complete mess of our gut. On the other hand, if it's helping to chelate the metals out, it's providing a service. So if you try to kill the Candida and you haven't gotten rid of the metals, you're just going to get Candida again because it's in every bite of food you eat. It's all over the place. I mean, that's why you could bake sauerkraut without having to use a starter culture, because it's in the air, right? These spores of everything are everywhere. So they're just waiting for a place to land that is conducive to their growth. So don't be conducive to their growth. And one of the things that makes us conducive to their growth is certain types of toxicity that for them is food, right? Like if you go to Chernobyl, you'll see that there's giant mushrooms there. They're finding a way to eat, and they're absorbing up some of the radiation. So nature will always find a way. If we understand the language that it's speaking to us, then we can get into we can have a conversation with it and say, hey, Candida, thanks for pointing out that I'm loaded with toxic metals. I'm going to work on that. And when I do, I'd like you to leave. You might find that that's a conversation you can have.
Yeah. We've had a lot of recently people asking about Candida. So that's why I kind of wanted to get a little bit more explanation to people.
It also relates to your blood types, so certain blood types have a more aggressive immune system. So the type O's have much more aggressive immune systems. They get less cancer, they get less heart attacks, because heart attacks, I believe, are based on infections in the heart and the arteries. And they live 15 years longer on average than, say, type A's. Type A's don't have as an aggressive immune system, much more likely to get cancer and heart attacks and Candida and all these things. The downside of the type O blood type is it's more prone towards autoimmune. So, if you're a type O, you don't have to worry as much about getting infections as long as you're in relatively good health, but you have to really mind that your body doesn't burn itself out with autoimmune reactions and go into arthritis and, all those type of Crohn's and all those type of things. If you're type A blood, then, you're probably not going to have so much of the arthritic issue and so much of the inflammatory issues, though you still can, but your immune system is not going to be as aggressive. So you're going to want to be doing things that go after infections in ways that your body might not do based on your blood type.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Do we have any? The one other thing I'd just like to mention, and this has been kind of something that we've discovered over the last 3 months, is the one cool side effect is people that have SIBO and SIFO. The Zoybin actually helps with clearing away symptoms.
Wait, I know what SIBO is. What's SIFO?
I think it's
Small intestine fungal overgrowth as opposed to bacterial overgrowth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we are actually doing kind of a long-term experiment with Brian. So on he's got a leaky gut. I think he's got a leaky gut. So, and he's trying, he's doing Zoybin, And right now, the stuff that, his doctor said is, he's had actually really awesome response to Zoybin. So, and he's actually he hasn't taken any medicine that the doctor told him, and he ended up doing just Zoybin as an experiment to see like if she can tell the difference, and she couldn't. So she thought that he was actually, not that I'm not telling anybody to stop taking their medication, but as an experiment, this was a good.
How much were they taking a day?
He was doing the 1 teaspoon every for 7 days. Essentially once every 2 weeks.
So 1 week on, 1 week off, a teaspoon a day.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah. So he said actually he got it in Thailand when he was traveling, and he kind of got it looked like an allergic reaction, and actually his body ended up developing an allergic reaction to vitamins. And he couldn't even take peptides because his body just would reject everything, and he would just get exhausted. He would just get burnt out. And he just, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And, I kind of started, poking like, you should start looking at your digestive system. Because if, there's, take the digestive peptides, take them at small amounts, do the Zoybin, and he kind of, and it helped. So he's right now, he's back to, pretty much probably 80% over, I mean, this is a process that took him 2 years to figure out what was wrong with him and kind of start resolving it. So, I mean, he's been fighting it for the last couple of years, but he's finally to a point of, his gut is now functioning again. So, and I think it was more the Zoybin did a lot more than the peptides did actually in this scenario. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Looks like we got a question from Jeremy on protocol for to detox Candida.
Okay. So first you have to kill it, right? So detox, normally would be for non-living things. So like the aflatoxins created by the Candida, you could detox, and that would be Xenoplex, the glutathione would bind to the aflatoxins. But Candida as a living thing, you wouldn't detox it, you have to kill it. And killing it isn't always possible. Sometimes what you really want to do is you want to put it to sleep or get it to go dormant and get it to leave. And one of the first things to do is basically to cut all fruit and sugars out of the diet, kind of do fat and protein diet for a while, and that will render it quiescent because there's just no food for it. Once you've got it kind of quieted down, you could consider actually using nystatin, which is an antifungal drug. I think it might be over the counter, but I don't believe it's absorbed past the intestines. So it might be the kind of thing that just wipes the fungus out of your gut and you start over from scratch. I mean, you could certainly do Zoybin. You could certainly do Elagica with that, start with a teaspoon and then go to a quarter teaspoon of the Zoybin and do an Elagica with each meal. But if it's a really nasty infection and you've, gotten off the sugars and you've, done everything you can, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It might be worth doing a little nystatin just to knock it down and then recolonize. And the recolonization part's important because, it's all about real estate in the gut. If you have, if the Candida is taking up, 20 square feet of space in your gut, right? Then you've got to have something else there to take the place of it so the Candida doesn't have a foothold to grow on. So you can do probiotics, you can do probiotic suppositories, and if it's really bad, you can do fecal transplants, which are finally becoming a little bit more mainstream, and they are exactly what they sound like. That's something that's been was pioneered in most recently in, I think, Australia about 15 years ago, but it's written about in ancient Chinese texts and goes back, at least 500 years. So what I would say is the way to think about Candida is one, do you have a bunch of metals in your body? If you do, get the metals out. That's the one of the things that they're there for. Two, lower your blood sugar, or the sugar in your gut. If you are going to eat sweet food, cover it with some kind of oil so it goes in slower. And then three, you can go after with the Zoybin and the Alopecia, and if nothing else is working, you might consider some nystatin.
Awesome. What would you recommend for a good recolonization, or for
Probiotics.
probiotics? Yeah.
Yeah. So, in my fantasy life, as president, I give $1 billion to the to research grants to come up with a good probiotic, because it would be great to have one. If you take the stool of a healthy person, there's 500 different strains going in there, and they're all doing something different. And the challenge with taking probiotics orally is they may not survive digestion. And if they do survive digestion, they may not colonize the human intestine. So you can do a stool analysis, and it'll show you which of the main classes of bacteria you're low on, and then you could do them individually. That's something you could, if you were wanting to do that, you could do that. The other thing is, once you have probiotics, you don't have to keep buying them. You just get a yogurt maker and culture them yourself. If you don't do dairy well, I used to grow probiotics carrot juice and make probiotic fermented carrot juice. So, once you've got it, don't just be satisfied with a pill of stuff, because if you cultured it and you're growing it, then it's living, right? Yeah. So I would say go get, either do a test and figure out exactly what you need, or go and get the one with the widest spectrum of bacteria and grow it in some milk or carrot juice in a yogurt maker and drink it every day.
Okay. Yeah. And I think in our last webinar we did with and I am tired. The last webinar we did, we actually talked about some good options for probiotics, and eating living, like kimchi and even things like that. So
Sure.
So the next question is, you mentioned heavy metals in combination with the Candida. How do you recommend checking on and removing heavy metals?
Right. Okay. So let me amend that. It's not heavy metals, it's toxic metals. Heavy metal is a metal with a specific gravity greater than that of water. So like, lead is a heavy metal, but then so is zinc and iron, and those are actually good for you. And a light metal like aluminum is bad for you. So, I shouldn't use the term heavy metal. The proper term would be toxic metal. And you can get rid of them quite easily with EDTA. There's a suppository where we put EDTA in it, and it's ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. So ethylene is, diamine is 2 protein groups, and tetra is 4, and acetic acid is vinegar. So it's ethylene with, a little bit of protein and 4 vinegars, which is why basically anything acidic is a chelator, right? So, lactic acid from working out is a chelator. Or lactic acid from kimchi is a chelator. There's lots of chelators in nature, but sometimes you want something that's a little stronger. So you can get one that's made in a lab, and that's EDTA, and that'll go and suck up all those metals. However, if you're toxic with mercury, you can't use EDTA, and you'd have to contact us later, or contact Vlad, and I'll tell him how to do it, because it's too much to get into in a podcast here. There's a very specific way you have to do mercury. The challenge with the mercury is, if you have, I think it's hexavalent chromium or oxidized iron in your bloodstream, along with mercury, and you take a chelator and it grabs on the mercury, and let's say the mercury was sitting someplace innocuous like your abdominal fat, and it grabs onto it, and then it bumps into one of those other two, the hexavalent chromium or the iron, Fe3, which is, Fe3 is in everyone's body. It's what happens when blood cells die, and then the iron comes out and some of it gets oxidized. They can knock the mercury off the EDTA or off the chelator, and to grab that, because the chelator wants those other 2 more. And so now you get free mercury. And if it ends up going in some place like the brain or the nervous system, you know, the spinal cord or the glands, then it's worse than where it was before, which was in the abdominal fat, which is redistribution. So you don't want to do that. So if you've got a mercury load, I mean, if it's a mild mercury load, then you can do EDTA and it'll, you know, even though it knocks some of it off, the next bit of EDTA will grab it back again. Don't worry about it. But if you've got a serious mercury load, there are some other chelators. There's one actually other chelator called amaramide. It's the only one that'll bind to mercury and won't let go. And so that's the way you have to do that one.
Okay. And then what's a good way to check on and check what the heavy metal?
Sure. How do you check your toxic metals? So classically, they would give you a urine challenge test. So they might, you know, check your urine and then give you a chelator and check your urine again and see the difference between the two and see how much comes out of you. Because if they just give you a urine test without challenging you, without triggering it to come out, then you might not show a lot of heavy metals, but because they're just sitting inside the tissue, not in your urine. So a challenge test where you take a chelator and then check your urine is a classic way to do it. Another way to do it's a hair test, where you take a piece of hair and they'll, I guess, burn it and put it in a mass spec analyzer and tell you. That one can also give you false negatives, because again, you can't challenge the hair like you can challenge the urine, right? If I give you a bunch of EDTA and then catch your urine, you'll start dumping all sorts of metals that wouldn't be in the urine normally because it's bringing them out and lets you know. You can't do a challenge on the hair test, right? Because it's a 3-month, you're getting 3 months of growth. So what you have to do if you're going to do a hair test is you have to know how to analyze some of the patterns. So for instance, if some of the macro elements, the calcium, sodium, magnesium, potassium, if they're really out of whack, it's mercury. Even if you don't see it, it's there. It just hasn't been challenged to come out yet. So either a hair test where you know how to interpret it, or a urine test with a challenge is how I do it.
And we do sell, we do offer a testing for people. We do a hair test. So people are interested. We do have it in our on our website, and you just mail it, you know, to us, and then we mail it to the lab, and they email you all the results. So,
Right. Just remember that, you know, they're giving you the results of what's in the hair, not necessarily the interpretation of the pattern that could indicate it's there, but not showing up yet.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's not. Yeah, it's a good point. It's not always, you know, just because you see it, it is. You know, you definitely have an issue or not. So. And then last, one more question we have is any recommendation on stool analysis?
If you're looking at parasites, I think Dr. Amin is probably the best place to go to. And if you're just looking at, if you're looking for just a general stool test, I think Great Smokies makes a good one. Doctor's Dad, I think, does one. There is one that's done. Let me see if I can find it for you here. There is one that does for the probiotic levels. And that, hang on, let me see if I can find this for you. Okay, here we go. Here's the test. Go to walkinlab.com, I think is the one. Yeah. It's the 1-day Genova. It's the comprehensive stool profile 1-day Genova test kit.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that will give you your probiotic setup. You know, and you should also be able to, you know, just kind of use your senses, right? Your stool shouldn't smell terrible. You know, it should be dark in color. If it's clay color, I mean, there are books that'll tell you, you know, how to interpret what your stool looks like, because, you know, for thousands of years, doctors didn't have these fancy tests, and they had to use their eyes. You know, what's the water content of it? Is it floating? Is it sinking? Does it smell terrible? Does it have little holes in it indicating that it's bubbling and fermenting? So you can, you know, get a lot just by looking at it. I mean, you know, you have an instinctive knowledge of what a healthy stool should look like and smell like, right? Yeah. But certainly if you have the capacity or the access to these tests, they're great to do.
Awesome, perfect. All right, any other questions, anybody? Let's see. Oh. All right, so we got a question on how to treat uterine fibroids.
Fibroids, sure. Okay, so a lot of times they can be self-limiting, right? They come and they go, and it's just an artifact sometimes of, the whole menopause experience. One of the things you've got to be figuring out is it sort of like associated with adhesions? Because sometimes women who've had abortions or who've had difficult childbirths, or anyone who's had abdominal surgery, that area is very prone to having little things stick together. As far as fibroids go, you could treat any growth like cancer just by default and say, hey, it's something growing that shouldn't be there. I'm going to do a cancer protocol. And if your cancer protocol doesn't happen to be toxic, then, no big deal. The other thing you can do is you can do castor oil over the pelvic region. And castor oil has been used for thousands of years for all sorts of abdominal and pelvic complaints. And so we have a product called Castor Pack, or Castor Patch, I think. And basically it's this castor oil that, the name for it's Palma Christi. They call this stuff historically the hand of Christ, because it's, considered to be such an amazing healer. And you basically put it on this kind of like saran wrap that we have, and you place it on, and it stays on in place, and you let it sit there for 2 hours. And castor oil both helps with adhesions and detox. So that would be my go-to for anything in that part of the body.
Awesome. All right. Let's see, any other questions we got? I think we're running up to an hour here, so we got about 10 minutes left. So we can do a couple more questions. Oh.
Alopecia universalis, is that what it sounds like? Meaning that every hair across her entire body is disappearing? Oof.
Wow.
Yeah, so my first thought is that's an autoimmune action happening. Okay, so the autoimmune, the body's attacking itself, right? And why would it do such a thing? Sometimes it's taught to, like, vaccines to teach you to go after your spike protein. Well, spike proteins are, the body can start attacking itself in various places. Like, I'm not going to get into that. The body can be taught to do this either intentionally by people that have an agenda, or toxins can do it, or bacteria. So when you get some kind of infection or some kind of toxin, and it is in a particular kind of tissue. So let's say your cousin worked in an industry where she was exposed to a particular kind of solvent that had an affinity for hair follicles, right? And so now the hair follicles are absorbing this toxin, thinking it's something nutritious. He used to work with his dad in a what?
Auto shop.
Auto shop. Right. Okay. So some pretty nasty chemicals in an auto shop. A lot of solvents are in there, right? Because you're cleaning the stuff off the engines, off the motor parts, and the old guys are doing it with their bare hands, and so they've got industrial solvents in their hands, right? So what happened possibly was some nasty chemical from the auto shop got in their body, either by breathing it or by, more likely, through skin contact, that had an affinity for the hair follicles. And the body recognized the toxin, but because it was there at the hair follicle, started associating the proteins and fats of the hair follicle with the toxin, and now is trying to not only get rid of the toxin, but get rid of the hair follicle. And you might say, well, but it's not an infection. Why is it doing that? Well, the immune system doesn't just go after infections. It actually breaks down toxins. The white blood cells will make hypochlorous acid, which is an oxidizer, which can also detoxify certain chemicals. So the immune system has a role to play in detox, which isn't normally commonly understood. So somehow the immune system has now considered his hair follicles as an enemy. So the way out of this, if it's possible, would be to, pull all those chemicals out. I mean, first off, you got to stop the exposure. First rule of detox is stop the exposure. He's got to stop working there, right? Unless he is okay having no hair. But who knows what's coming next. So find a new job, or get an industrial grade air filtering, recircling air filtering system, and wear gloves when you're working. So get out of that in location, and then the Xenoplex will start flushing that out of the body, and that could take, a couple of months, right? When all of it's out, then what we're going to, you want to try to do is you want to get the immune system to calm down, and fish oils and all sorts of things can do that. But you may need to do something like a series of 10 to 14-day water fasts, because what you want to do is you want to cannibalize the white blood cells that think that the skin is an invader, and reset your immune system. And fasting is one way you could do that, a water fast.
Okay, she said that he stopped working, and it's got triggered when his mother passed, and triggered a hair loss over 2 days. So it was
Stress related, sure. That's classically known, right? So it might have nothing to do with the auto shop, or that might be a contributing factor. It's hard to know. What I would do is get him a box of Xenoplex and see if he has any kind of reaction to it. And if he does, that it might be that that stress was the hair that broke the camel's back, right?
Yeah.
Let me know how it turns out, Alina.
Yeah, definitely keep us.
Oh, hold on a sec. Alisa, could you click the gate? All right, thank you. There's a lot of ways in which the body can get a little screwy. And when we get sick, normally it's because a number of things have happened beforehand that we weren't aware of, right? So these toxins were in this man's body for, as long as he's been working at this place. And then finally something happens and it goes into symptoms. And I think it's, much preferable to not have to wait for something to manifest physically. Start clearing this stuff out of the tissue ahead of time before you even start getting symptoms. So, because as we, eventually as we get older, the body's going to start to fail. So, the less toxins you have in your body, the farther out you push that point, the more homeostatic strength and capacity you have to deal with those insults. Had he done done some good chelation, maybe last year, then when his mother passed, sorry to hear that. Yes, it would have been terribly sad and he would have grieved, but he might not have been pushed over the edge into having an autoimmune reaction like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting how that works, and all the past triggers and past experiences can come out and surprise you. So I mean, and we don't even know what's really affecting us until it gets triggered sometimes. So
well, I think sometimes people will say, how do I test to see if I'm toxic for chemicals? Imagine you brought your car into the oil change shop at 5,000 miles, and you said, hey, before I spend $100 changing my oil, I would like you to do a full chemical workup on the oil that's in my truck, because maybe I don't need to. And what the person would say is, well, I've been changing oil in trucks for 50 years, and I can tell you at 5,000 miles, the oil of every car has broken down oil and little bits of metal shavings from the engine and little bits of burnt material from gaskets. And yes, we could spend thousands of dollars doing an analysis on the damaged oil in your car, or you could just realize that it's 5,000 miles, it's just time to change the oil. And if you don't change the oil, it's not like that day your car malfunctions. It drags the car down. The engine wears out faster, and sooner rather than, at a sooner point in time, it doesn't get the fuel mileage, and then at a sooner point in time, you find that the engine does have problems. And that's very much like humans. You could spend a fortune finding out all the toxins that are in your body. It's a lot cheaper to just say, I know that there's toxins because that's just the nature of the world we live in now. They're coming at me from food, water, air, you know, occupation, the carpets I'm walking on, everything. So I'm just going to say once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, I'm just going to flush all the junk out. And then hoping that my engine will then appreciate that and last longer. What's low mileage? When a car doesn't get good mileage, that's like chronic fatigue for a human. It just doesn't have the energy. Something's up, right?
Yeah, and a great point is a lot of times I will do, that's kind of how I figure out a lot of stuff on, if I have an issue or not. You can always go and even sometimes you can do the hormone test, and you can do a lot of these things that'll tell you if it's impacting you and it's actually making a huge impact. I'll go through and I'll do, I do all the detoxes, over, once a year. And I'll do all the peptide. I'll try to go through most of the peptides, and I'm not even talking, let's do a full 30 days. I just take a box, 10 peptides, and I try them. And you see what happens, right? You see how your body reacts, which ends up telling you what it could be possibly wrong with you, right? If I take one of the most interesting ones I've done, I've taken the pineal peptide all the time because I tend to have issues sleeping. But over the last 2-3 years, it's been great. I've never had issues sleeping. But I ended up doing one of the limited edition peptides we had, which was like, I think like $400 or $500 for a 30-day box. But it was supposedly this, the best thing you can for your pineal. And I took it. And one of the biggest things I started realizing, I started having extremely vivid dreams. So, I mean, to the point where I go to sleep and I'm in a movie, right? It's so realistic. It's just, incredible. And I would wake up, and go back to sleep, and I would have a completely different movie going on. And, for me, that's a, huge signal that my pineal gland wasn't fully at 100%, because, now that I did this 30-day peptide product, my dream, my sleep is completely different. And, I'm still, this has been, it's been 8-9 months since I took that 30-day pineal product, and my dreams are still extremely vivid. So it changed me for forever. So, or, until it gets, back to it. But it's the same thing with the detox. You will feel, once you start that detox for a couple of days, you will feel it, right? If you have something that needed to be detoxed or not. And, 89 or 69 bucks, is pretty cheap, considering, you get to have a lot of issues flushed out. So
yeah, one of the other detoxes you can do is actually the Lymplex, and that's the one to flush out the lymphatic system. It's overlooked by a lot of people, and a pretty common thing you'll hear from people that take that is they'll start feeling tingling in their throat or under their arms or in the crease of their groin, because that's where the lymph nodes are.
yeah.
And you can start flushing all sorts of junk out of that. The lymph is where the body is kind of it's the sewage system of the body. It's
Exactly,
where
yeah.
everything is dumped into. And sometimes things will get stuck in there. And so that's the kind of thing you can do every couple of years, is just to go in there and dredge out it's like cleaning the gutters. It's like changing it's like flushing out the septic tank. It's like a maintenance kind of thing you can do, just to flush those out. And if you take it and you don't feel anything, you're done. And if you take it and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, what's all this stuff going on in here? Well, okay, so that was the lymphatic system that was getting dredged out.
I actually got to do that because me and my wife have both noticed we have like the two glands in the back of your throat. You start getting the little white, they start developing little white tops on them, and your breath ends up stinking really bad for a while, so, and it's Like, so I've been planning on doing something like that. That's a good reminder.
Yeah, you know, because if some of that stuff, sometimes you'll see people that'll actually get holes, little pits in certain sections of their throat, and then little stones will form in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what, I have.
And then you gotta have to have the stones actually popped out, and then these horrifically stinky little stones come out of the throat.
Yep. Yeah, I had that. So my wife has that all the time too. So, we got another quick question. Looks like doctors found out his testosterone was 3 times higher than a normal person. Actually, that's back to the hair loss alopecia.
So he had an incredibly high testosterone at the same time.
Yeah.
Was he always kind of like a manly, muscular, kind of aggressive person as long as you knew him?
Not really muscular, just tall and thin.
That's interesting that there's just there is a natural variation, right? And then we have sex hormone binding globulin that can kind of cool that stuff off. There are natural variants. You know, you could have someone with 3 times as much testosterone in their blood, but because they don't have testosterone receptors, functionally they don't have as much testosterone action in their tissue. That is interesting, and it would make me wonder if maybe there's some kind of malignancy going on. When you start seeing hormone levels fluctuate like mad, you got to wonder if there's something weird going on in the glands. So that's probably something that an endocrinologist should address.
Okay, thank you. All right, guys. Well, any last thoughts, Spencer, before we sign off?
Please don't get vaccinated. If you have, please don't get any more. There's the Omicron virus that's going around is incredibly contagious and incredibly safe. Almost, it's very hard to get really sick on that one. Some people think that that particular virus is actually made by some white hats, by some good folks, as a way to cure COVID, because it would give everybody immunity without getting them really ill. So, you know, we're at a point now where we might go one of 2 ways. Things might get worse, it might get better. In the United Kingdom, they just got rid of all the mandates, all the masks, all of it. You know,
I was just watching that today.
And God willing, that happens here too. What I would say is, if you're feeling pressure to do any of those things, hang on. We might be at a point where they're finally going to stop. One hopes. If not, there are things you can do to try to detox that vaccine. I think that the vaccine damage is going to be the main occupation of most people in the health practice for the next 30 years, is dealing with the fallout from the people who've taken them. So the last thing I would say is, please, if you haven't and you're considering it, or you're going to think about getting another one, there's a lot of research out there you can avail yourself of, and just look at both sides of the equation before you do that. You may decide if that's something you really want to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Spencer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will close the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And this will be posted. We're live on YouTube, so as well. So if we we'll probably publish in a couple of days. So the webinar maybe edited out a little bit, make it a little more better flowing, but it's going to be all on YouTube. So if somebody came in late or missed something, this will all be available for everybody to view. So other than that, everybody have a great rest of the day, and enjoy your Thursday night.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and I apologize for being late.
Oh, no worries. It's always a pleasure having you here.
Wow.
Everybody.
So I'm sorry if you lost anybody during that.
No, I think everybody stayed. So
nice. All righty.
All right, Spencer. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I guess we're not going to be talking tomorrow. That was totally my screw up. But I mean, as far as screw ups go, 7 minutes wasn't too wasn't too bad. Could
No,
have been.
I just kept, I just started talking. So we're all good.
Yeah, you know what? Just I see you're asking, can we ship to the Bellevue address? Just forward that request over to Tanya. I mean, I believe I emailed both of you saying, "Hi Tanya, this is Vlad. Please, please here's the address I really wanted to." And hopefully,
Yeah, I'll send it right now. So.
all righty. Well,
All right. Well, you have a good night. I'm exhausted, so I've been traveling a lot. So I'm
yeah,
actually
yeah.
flying out to Mexico this week. So for my birthday.
Oh, are you? What are you just going for vacation?
Cancun.
Ah, nice.
So
Nice.
yeah.
All right, brother.
All right, Spencer. You have a good night.
You too.
Everybody else.